Welcome to Beneath Your Beautiful, where guests share stories of adversity and perseverance, which inspire, encourage, and challenge us. We embrace these tough conversations, intimately exploring our loves, fears, and hopes with a delicious combination of depth and lightness.
My name is Timothy Bolen. I am the founder of Together We Live and the head coach and owner of Excel and Beyond Coaching. Together We Live is a nonprofit that was created in 2013 to provide inclusion opportunities for individuals with any type of disability. Primarily what we do is we pair athletes with individuals that are unable to compete in such outdoor activities or sports so that they can compete and so that they can cross a finish line of any race, or they can summit Camelback Mountain or go surfing, do any of those amazing outdoor activities that we all take for granted.
What inspired it?
Great question. So it boils down to two parts. In 1989, when I was competing at the World Championships in Hawaii for triathlon, I happened to meet a father-son duo named Dick and Ricky Hoyt. Ironically, they were the next suite over in the hotel. So we just became good friends and hung out at the pool, got to get to know and see the love and the care and kindness that they displayed just naturally and authentically. And when I asked Dick Hoyt, Ricky's dad, why he was there and why he does what he does, his quote just resonates. His son's quote was, "It is the only time that he has ever felt in his life that he has no disability." When he's out running with his dad. And for me, that just was the siren that went off in my head of saying, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But why does it just have to be a family member that does that? Why can't it be a friend? Why can't it be another athlete that cares enough and still wants to have that opportunity to show their love for someone else? So you fast forward, and my niece had what was called Pallister's Hull syndrome, Sydney Hudson. And what it was cerebral palsy, but none of her internal organs ever developed through birth. So when she was born, she was bolus fed, hormone shots, a lot of work to even just keep her alive on a daily, monthly, basis.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time in the hospital. My brain resonated back to Dick and Ricky Hoyt. She still deserves the same opportunities as everybody else to be able to still understand and feel what it's like to cross a finish line of any race. And her parents, they're absolutely amazing. They live their life with Sydney as though she had no disability. And for me, that was just a huge example of just one more reason why we needed to create Together We Live and be able to provide those opportunities, not only for loved ones, but more so for those individuals that may not have the friendships that are in their lives. And we can create that for them.
Yeah.
And for the parents.
Will you explain to me how the athlete helps the athlete?
Yeah. For me, we look at it as being that the support athlete is actually helping the athlete. But after conversation after conversation, once we pair these individuals together, the most common thread that comes of the whole thing was, this completely just changed my life. It has changed how I see the abilities that I have on my own and be able to go selfishly go compete on a weekly basis and take it for granted that I can go do these things when I could have the capacity to serve to someone else and do this with someone else to bring joy, not only to that athlete, but to their whole entire family.
So the able-bodied athlete is saying it's changing their lives.
Yes. That's probably the most common thread that I ever hear through the whole experience. And so, my goal is always to try to incorporate as many new athletes, support athletes as I can, so that they can also get that sense. And what I do find, even if they don't stay long-term involved with Together We Live, they leave with that experience of saying, I'm just so grateful for what I've been given in my life. And it just changes them. And it changes the athletes as well and their families to see the love of a stranger come in and love on their loved one. That's probably the biggest message that comes from it. The most common comment now is, I don't want to do a race alone anymore. I would much rather sign up every other weekend so that I can push Riley or push Patrick or push one of the Together family members than go racing an Ironman by themselves. And for me, that says we're doing it right. But there's another side of that too that comes from it. And it's a side that I never even imagined or perceived when it was first created. Because of course my head was more of a tunnel vision of, I need to serve individuals with disabilities. But what we found in the whole scheme of this was why the athlete and the support athlete are out running. The parents are back at the tent where we basically have people that grill up breakfast and do stuff while they're sitting there and waiting. And we always do it at Tempe Town Lake, which is absolutely beautiful there. And they can overlook the lake and they can almost watch us run the whole entire 5 miles around the lake. So they have that self-security of knowing that their loved one is in good hands too. But what we find is the one thing with someone that has so many needs is there's not enough answers. And as a parent, you're always trying to find answers for your loved one. And sometimes doctors just don't necessarily have what it is that they're looking for. And what we find is when we can put 20 or 30 parents together in a small area and really start talking about the struggles that they're having with their loved ones, it becomes a huge, almost networking similarities of struggles that they've had and processes that they've had to go through with their loved one. And a lot of answers are solved in just those little breakfasts that we do. So that was just a side that I never even envisioned to happen. And it's just authentically happened. And it's amazing. Yeah, it's super cool.
What is your profession besides this nonprofit? And I assume it's a nonprofit.
Yep, it's a nonprofit. I would say the bread and butter of what I do is my Excel and Beyond coaching, where I coach endurance athletes. That is definitely my livelihood anymore. And I'm very blessed that I've had that over the years. I can't even count on one hand how many times my coaching has come full front and has literally saved my life time and time again.
In what way?
I would say the most recent is in January 10th, 2020, when I was diagnosed with terminal cancer. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to keep the full-time jobs that I had once had. My background was serving as a state director, executive director, or CEO of nonprofits. I've served in 5 different nonprofits over that time period. And that used to be my bread and butter. But since my diagnosis and having to go through all the chemo and all the treatments and doctor's appointments, and then just really just having to wrap my head around what it's like to know where I am physically, I didn't want to spend the rest of my life sitting in an office serving another organization when I knew for a fact that my heart already had what I wanted to be doing. I just needed to figure out how could I create that on my own and could it be sustainable and be able to move forward with that. And so that's what I've done. And it really has been through the blessing of all the athletes from Excel and Beyond that has saved my life. They literally every month pay my bills, allow my roof over my head, and they're there at any turn. And I can give you an example. Yesterday, I put out what's called the 10 Summits Challenge. It's exactly a mile from the bottom to the top. It's extremely challenging, straight up. It's 1,000 feet of elevation gain. And I think the big thing for me is it's symbolic of life. The whole way up are thousands of steps, taking step after step. Some of these steps are 6 inches, and others are 2 feet tall. We know that when those steps are small, that we can manage and maintain and get over these steps. But when we face these large ones, Do I have enough energy? Do I have enough motivation to get over that? Am I mentally prepared to make that next step? And so for me, after doing, say, even 5 of those climbs, your body's starting to wear on it and it's like starting to scream at you. And then you come up on one of these big steps and you're like, oh God, I got to get up over this thing again. Right. And by the time you get to the 9th and 10th one, you're just looking at these big steps saying, oh my God, how am I going to get up over this thing? So I chose that to really be the challenge. And to my surprise, since I created it 2 weeks before I started getting all my chemo treatments. So, I had this big knot on the side of my neck with the cancer and the lymph nodes completely crazy. And my whole philosophy behind it was not only do we all face these things. Yes, I have a cancer diagnosis. Yes, there's no cure for it. But the big thing for me is, how do I keep moving forward knowing this? And how am I going to be able to face some of these really, really hard days that I knew that were going to be in front of me? And the only thing that kept resonating in my head was, if I'm going to have to face something really hard, I'm going to have to do something really hard. And if I do something really hard and I can finish that hard, there is no doubt in my mind that I'm going to be able to face whatever it is that's in front of me. It's not just me fighting cancer. Yes, our message is F you to cancer. That's why we're climbing today. Mm-hmm. It's not really about that. For me, it's more about each person's journey up that mountain is that they're willing and they're able to face something really hard on their own for their own reason, whatever that is. And maybe it's you have a loved one that's going through addictions, or maybe you have someone else that's, really struggling with depression. So for me, that was just really, really symbolic. Every climb, you're going up and down that mountain, slapping and high-fiving and encouraging one another. Let's do it one more. Let's get this done. Like, don't forget why you're here. Figure out what that is, take that next big step. Mm-hmm. And it's really evolved into a beautiful thing. I have a son and a daughter, twins, Cole and Chloe.
And how old are they?
They're seniors in high school, so they just turned 18 years old. What
do you want them to know about what you do, about your life? What kind of legacy do you hope to leave them?
Oh, that's a great question. It's a great question. I'm going back to this because it kind of helps bring this thing full circle. Is on January 10th, I remember waking up that morning and my daughter telling me as I'm driving her and Cole to school, Dad, go straight to the emergency room. You have to go to the emergency room. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she goes, your neck literally doubled in size last night. And I hadn't even noticed it, right? Like I just put my cap on in the morning and drove them to school and wasn't really thinking of anything. And she looked at me before I even got out of the car. She was adamant. She goes, Dad, I need you to promise me that you're going to the hospital right after this. Because I'm stubborn. I've got that determined head that says, I'll be fine, whatever. It's just a bacteria infection, no big deal. Don't worry about it. But it was her will that I needed to go. And so I went. And I'm grateful for that because, it literally went from stage 3 to stage 4. Which was really scary for me. But had I waited another month or another 2 months, who knows, what that would have evolved into. So I'm very grateful of my daughter. And I remember sitting in the hospital bed, because this was after they did all the blood works and all the exams and the CT scans and all the rest of it. And they said, you can't leave the hospital. We're admitting you into a room. And I'm like, well, what's going on, right? Like a whirlwind of information and really literally even how they just handled that whole diagnosis and the messaging was horrible. I mean, I definitely think doctors need to take a lesson in how to tell somebody that they have a terminal cancer and that they're going to have a fight in front of them and, it's going to change their lives.
What did they say?
After 4.5 hours of sitting in the ER room, the doctor just pulled me over next to this wall with 8 other patients on this wall sitting in chairs. And he just came over and stood up right in front of me. And he's like, I just want you to know that you have cancer. I'm sorry about that. And I'm like, oh my God, serious? That's how you're going to tell me that information? And I sat there and he goes, and it's serious.
What do you wish he had said? Or how would you have preferred he say it?
I wish that he maybe had pulled me away from all the other people that were in that setting.
Yeah.
Even if it was just in a corner, I'm not even asking for another room or a private area, maybe just a little area for myself.
Yeah.
Where he could look at me and just say, hey, listen, I have some really hard news. This might be hard for you to hear.
Yeah.
I just want to be very open with you and let you know this is what we discovered. It just wasn't like that. It was just like, hey, you have a cold, go get some meds, get out.
Right.
And for me, that's kind of how I perceived it. And I remember after that news came and I had some tears running down my head because, of course, your brain is just going in all different directions after you hear that.
Sure.
And a nurse came around and so she grabbed me and she put me into a private room that was shared with one other person. She goes, I understand that you have kids that are at high school. Can you make arrangements to make sure that they can get picked up because you're going to have to stay here? And that just struck a chord for me. And I'm just bawling in this room, crying, out loud. And this guy's looking at me like, what's going on? I just think that whole part of it could have just been handled a little more delicately and with a little more compassion.
For sure.
It is what it is. So I'm sitting up in my patient room. And of course, my best friend shows up on the spot. 2 other really, really close friends of mine show up on the spot. And I had another really close friend of mine who picked up my kids. It was really ironic that the first thing that I noticed about myself was first denial. Even though I had proof and evidence that I knew exactly what I had to face, still in this denial. And I say that in the respect that I couldn't even sit in that hospital bed. I had to sit in the chair that was in the side of the room because I refused to get in that bed.
Yeah.
So my best friend's just sitting in the bed, laying there, just all cozy. Hey, what's going on?
That's cute.
Yeah, but I just refused to get in there because I wanted no part of it. Like, I just want to get out of here. And when the doctor came in and he says, listen, this is pretty serious. We need to get you settled in and get you a firm diagnosis of exactly what you have to face here. We have to do a withdrawal and a biopsy, and we're going to have to keep you for the weekend. And I looked at him, I'm like, no way, I can't. Like, I have 2 sophomores in high school, so where the plate's full. I'm a single dad. I can't just sit here in this hospital bed. I'm sorry. If there's something else we can do. And he was like, well, we're not going to be able to get you the biopsy done unless you stay. It's just that simple. I'm like, oh God. So my kids show up and all I kept thinking in my head was, I don't want my kids to see that this is gonna interfere with anything that they have on their plate moving forward. Just because I have this diagnosis doesn't necessarily mean this is going to impact the whole family. It's not going to change what they do on a daily basis. I wanted them to see that from the very get-go. That was all I had in my head was, I don't want them to see their dad as weak, laying in a hospital bed, scared, whatever, all that, I was dealing with at the time. And I remember my kids walking through the door and I'm sitting in that side chair, kind of brain going 100 miles an hour. And as soon as I see them, of course, I'm cracking jokes and laughing and just saying, it's just another small hurdle. It's nothing that we haven't had to face throughout our lives. This is no big deal. We just need to get a lot of answers and figure out what that process is going to look like for us moving forward. So that's why we're here. And so since then, the only thing that I always tried to do was, even through all of my chemo and treatments, was I always tried to put those on weeks that the kids weren't at the house, because I never wanted them to see me that sick or weak or frail or any of that, because that's just not what they've seen in the past.
Yeah.
And at the same token, for me, it was more of, I just want them to see their dad. I try to live a really positive, loving, healthy, happy life. And I try to share that with as many people as I can. But of course, when you're on chemo and you're super sick and death wearing you over, it's like you can't have that attitude, right? You just want to get out of bed. That was your goal. And I didn't ever want them to see that. And even today, I still try not to share really, even on the hard days that when I have hard days, like I just crack a joke or I'm like, no, you know what? You can go do that for me. That would be amazing. It would be super helpful, and figure out a different way to do that. But I think the legacy behind it all is no matter what we face, there's struggles in everyone's life. Some are more serious than others. I don't find mine to be all that serious, even though I'm facing a terminal. It's not terminal in respect of you have 6 months to live. That's not my diagnosis. My diagnosis is I could have 5 to 7 years, but in that 5 to 7 years, I can still have gaps in between me chemo treatments and the days of feeling bad and the rest of that. Those are the days that I thrive forward and let my kids see that I'm still chasing after everything that I have on my plate and then some, because now everything has been expedited 10 times quicker than what you think when you have a whole lifespan in front of you. So it's really just put the urgency button on, and it has really helped me achieve some things with Together We Live and my coaching business that I would have never thought I would be where I am today had it not been for this diagnosis, because it's just forced me to make decisions that I would have not made when I was comfortable and secure. I would say the legacy for my kids would be no matter what your diagnosis is, no matter what you face in life, I think the thing is one, treat life with an urgency. We can't ever take anything for granted. I know it's cliche, but it is so true. And then the second thing is if there's really something that you're passionate about and that you really love and you believe in, you just have to follow your heart. You have to follow your heart, regardless of what the sanity says. How am I going to make a living? Do I really have the knowledge to be able to go do this? You just have to follow your heart and just believe that it's going to work. And if you do that enough, it's going to work.
I heard somebody in 2019 and they changed my life because they said that if it's on your heart, it's there for a reason and you're supposed to do it. And life is waiting for you to do it.
Yeah. I think that's maybe the thing that most people do struggle with. Like you found that for yourself, and fantastic that message resonated with you, because obviously you already had it within you to say, this is something I really love. How do I make it work now? And that someone just pushed your button to say it's on. Now go do it. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important, because I probably have weekly conversations with people who are miserable with their job. They hate what they're doing. Their life is in turmoil. And I just hear this excuse after excuse after excuse. Right. And I say excuse because really it is.
I agree.
In the big scheme of things, I'm coaching over at this Marcos Deniza High School here in Tempe, Arizona. And I chose that school because it was a school of really high needs, of bringing in a program there that had been lacking for years. Maybe I can just make an impact on 3 or 4 of these young kids, then I've done my job. Mm-hmm. But I hear all of these excuses. And the one thing that I try to tell these kids really early on in life right now is, listen, I hear what you're saying. I'm validating that I heard what you said, but I'm going to challenge you back in realizing that in life, no matter what we face, we always have a choice. We always have a choice. Everything that I do in my life now is, there's no pity party for me. It's like I can either feel sorry for myself or I can change how I feel right now and go do something by choice.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be a success and maybe it'll be a huge flop, but it was still my choice. I still got to do it. I was registered to do Ironman Wisconsin this last September, where I was going to be racing with a young man, Patrick Kinez, and I would pull him in a raft to the swim. We have a tandem bike. So he sits in the front of the bike and we would do the bike together. And then I push him in the running chair for the run, right? And so we were super fired up, super excited. Like we had so much riding on this thing, did tons of fundraising so we could actually go and do this thing. And what happens is the day before the race, weather was phenomenal and they put on the half Ironman that day. And so we were doing our practice swim and enjoying the weather and having a great time. So race morning come around, we wake up 3 a.m. and it's thunderstorms, pouring rain out. We're like, oh my God, we're not even going to be able to race. Like, what is going on? Although the thunderstorms were gone and the lightning were gone, it was still downpouring the whole day. It was super cold in the morning. Of course, it's Wisconsin. And so we get him through the water. We'll get out of the water. Did great with that part. Got him on the bike and he's shivering, like freezing cold. Of course, he just laid in the boat in the rain for an hour and a half, freezing cold. And so we get out and we put him in tons of layers. And my very first thing going through my head is, I just want Patrick to be safe. Just if, you as parents tell me it's okay, and then we'll go out. But if not, it's okay too. And so we ended up going out on the bike and we got almost halfway done with the bike. And I noticed that Patrick started having seizures and was starting to throw up. And I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. There's no Ironman finish line that's that important.
Right.
It's just not worth it. And so I remember, obviously getting support crews in, getting him into safety and some warmth, and he recovered fairly quickly. And his parents telling me, like, had we stayed out there for probably another 30 minutes to an hour, he would have been in ER for the next 2 weeks. He would just been that sick. And so that we made the right decision. And I was like, okay, I appreciate you telling me that. That helps me process things better. But I just remember the whole drive because I drove there with all of our equipment. So I had 3 days of driving back across the country to really process everything that had just happened, right? And the way that I see that is, did we fail accomplishing what we set out to do? Absolutely, we did. Because, had we went from the start to the finish and crossed the finish line, we would have been successful and completed it, right? But we did fail in the respect that we weren't able to finish the race. Did we make the right decisions? Absolutely. No question about it. We kept Patrick safe and we made the right decisions. But I really struggled with that processing of the months and months of really, really hard training that went into this and the sacrifices that were made, asking people to donate to us. And then we didn't even get to finish the race. A lot of stuff really starts going through your head, right? And, at one point, I must have been in Kansas or something. And I pulled off on the side of the road and this big train was starting to come by. So I sat up on this little cliff edge to watch the train come by. And I just found massive tears coming down. And I'm like, why are you crying? You're being a child. Like, what's going on? And I think it was just that release of failure that I just experienced for myself, because for me, that's how I perceived it. Yes, I know we did the right thing, but for me, it was still absorbing the fact that we weren't able to finish that race was really, really hard emotionally. And I think it was more so like for me to be able to bring Patrick across the finish line so that he could be an Ironman was my biggest gift that I could give him personally. And of course, selfishly for myself, being able to say that we could do that together. But it was that sadness of not being able to do that I think it's just totally overwhelmed me. And what it's done for me at that point was I've accepted the failure. I've accepted the consequences. I've accepted the fact that nature is nature. It is what it is, right? But it's also motivated the hell out of me.
To what?
Figure out different things that we could have done differently, first and foremost. Like, could we have put a plastic bubble over top of Patrick so he wouldn't have been soaking wet during the swim, so he couldn't been freezing before we even got him on the bike? Just those things, how do we get him on a bike, and can we put a shell on the bike so if it's pouring, he won't get soaking wet. We can still see it through to the finish. So in respect of that, like being able to say, even in the worst conditions, now we can eliminate these little obstacles along the way. So the failure no longer is a failure.
Right.
I think that's the takeaway from it all is as long as we learn from what our failures are, it's okay to embrace them.
Do you know what Patrick thought?
I've had conversations with him. Patrick is probably the most stubborn guy I've ever met, first and foremost. I remember the whole race. Like I'm asking him, are you sure you even want to start this? It's freezing cold. It's downpouring. And he was very adamant. We got to go. We got to go. Let's go. Let's do this. So we took him out, got him in the water. And I remember a couple of times during the swim, I'd stop and get up on the side of the raft and say, are you okay? Are you okay? You know, and he's like, I'm okay. Go, swim, go. Right. And I'm like, okay, all right, fine. And I even remember to the point where we started having some major mechanical issues with the tandem bike that we had, the shock that holds Patrick up in his front basket. That shock went out during the bike portion, even within the first 10 miles of the bike ride. I'm like, oh my God, 112 miles of this. Oh, because it was rubbing on the front of the tire, right? His whole body weight came right down. And so the frame was on that tire. And so we had to keep stopping and lifting that up. And every time that happened, I would look at him and I'm like, are you doing okay? Are you okay? I need to know that. You need to talk to me through this whole thing. And he would just say, let's go. Let's go. That's all he would keep saying is let's go. Even to the point where up to that one point where, you know, I saw that he was shaking and having the seizure in his seat and then just threw up profusely afterwards. Right. I'm like, dude, we're done. We're calling it. There's no race that important. And he was like, we got to go. Let's go. Like even in his head, he's still, I want to get it done. Right. Yeah, and maybe that was the other part of this failure that I was feeling.
I see. Yeah.
You know, it never turned off for him, but sensibly we knew we were making the right decision.
Right.
And as soon as we pulled him off, I propped him up against this tree because, you know, between the bike and him, he's about 150 pounds, right? So just try to hold him there was pretty challenging. And so we put him underneath this tree to try to shade him from the wind and the rain. And I looked at him and I'm like, are you okay that we're done? I need to know that right now. And he's like, yes. And as soon as he said that, it was just validation we made the right choice. And so that really helped. But within the 24 hours after that, we're having breakfast at the hotel the very next morning. And he's like, when's the next one? That's all that went through his head was like, we need to do this. We got to get this off the bucket list. When's the next one? And so we were really, really blessed with, you know, we had some really good news coverage that came in and basically covered our story together. And so Ironman came back and they comped us into another race for free, which is, you know, $1,000. This is, you know, for a small nonprofit, it's a lot of money when we ship it out.
Yeah.
And they comped us in for this next race, and it's going to be in Tulsa, Oklahoma on May 21st. So,
oh, how exciting.
So redemption, we're titling it our redemption race, and he's super excited. And yeah, we can't wait to get it done. God willing, if everything aligns perfectly, it'll be a great day. Before I had Cole and Chloe, I lived a life black and white. But then as soon as I had these kids, everything became full color. You understood what life is when you're a parent. And only parents will understand that when you have your child and you have it right in front of you and you're holding them in the hospital and you're like, oh my God, this is my best gift I've ever had in my life. And this is mine. I think for me, when I was hiking yesterday, the thing that really resonated with me was I always knew I had good friends, but I never understood the depth of those friendships, truly how much people do for one another. And I've seen it time and time again for the last 3 years, the depth of these friendships. And the only thing that I would really tell people is look around you. You know those people that are your rocks for you. Be very, very grateful for them. Never take them for granted. Make sure you constantly tell them that you're grateful for them. And more so, just cherish every minute that you get with each one of them. And for me, that's been the message that I try to send to all of my friends is I know how much you do for me, even behind the scenes that I don't see, that I know that you're advocating for Excel and Beyond, or that you're advocating for Together We Live behind the scenes to make sure that, again, my legacy will continue to live on even when I'm not here. And can you ask for better friends than that? And I would have never pictured that before my diagnosis. My friends were my friends, and they're great to have around. And there are people to troubleshoot off of when you're having a hard day or whatever. But it is just so much deeper than that. And I think that's just another one of those primary examples of how we don't see life in full color with those people that are truly blessings in your life.
Thanks for sharing your story with me.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And I'm so glad that somebody nominated you to be a change maker in the magazine. I'm really excited about that. So thanks for sharing your heart and your story and your legacy.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity. And you know what? Like you and the work that you're doing, if we can just steer one person who may not be on the right path, but tell them to just take the courage of believing in themselves enough to just take that chance, then we've both done our part, right?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Beneath Your Beautiful, hosted by Hara Allison. And thank you for your ratings and reviews. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Stay tuned.